All right, creatures, all of you out there, I'm assuming everything's still working. Of course, I can't see anything because, as usual, all this stuff is going weird, but it doesn't matter. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may happen to be. I'm still Tad. You're still whoever you were when you started out, unless you've had a sudden change of heart. And I am going to do my best to actually make something in terms of figuring out the comments tonight, but don't count on it because I still haven't figured out what the problem is. Facebook and I, we are old acquaintances. We are friends, just sort of. But we definitely are aware of each other's foibles. And I still haven't figured out how to make comments exactly work. And of course, because now I'm doing this slightly differently, what I'm looking at is about 2 minutes ahead of what you're looking at. So as I'm speaking now, the stuff that I was saying 2 minutes ago is just happening. So it's easier for me to look at the part here that is current and up to date. But I'll go back every now and then and have a look at the comments and see if I can make sense out of them. If worse comes to worse, I can at least get the list of who's on and say hello to people who've bothered to check in, comment-wise. So, oh, hang on. This shouldn't be here. That shouldn't be there. Okay. That should be there. Anyway, hello, good evening again. I know I already said that, but it's like the only... Okay, now I'm acting as Tad Williams on Facebook as compared to all the other things that I act as on Facebook, which is also Tad Williams. So what do I have to tell you this week? Nothing, just still doing... Everything is pretty much the same. We are dealing with many things. I had one of my two close friends from my youth came by today, who was visiting in town from North Carolina, which is where he lives now. And so we had a chance to hang out and just talk all kinds of the kind of nonsense that we always talk about when we get together, and have ever since we were in, God, 8th grade, I think, is when we first started hanging out. When we were sitting in the same Spanish class and realized that we were surrounded by idiots. Back in old Jordan Junior High School, back in the previous century. Anyway, so it was great to see him today, and it was great to have a chance to hang out. And what else has been going on? I'm working, as always. I am working, finishing up Navigator's Children and popping through this kind of rewrite polish thing, and that's going well. And let me think, what else was I going to talk about? Something that's really, I don't know what the... It's really interesting that because of the fact that I watch YouTube a lot, that's kind of what I tend to watch now, just because there's a lot of short things I can watch, and it's a very broad collection of different kinds of things that I'm interested in. And also I can find lots of things that are not fiction, and because frankly, I do fiction all day, every day, 7 days a week. It kind of helps me to not do fiction. It's kind of crippled me. When Deborah was a publisher, she couldn't read for fun for years afterward, because that was all she did, was read other people's books and fiction, because that's what she was publishing at the time. And in much the same way it's happened with me. I don't get as much pleasure as I would like to out of fiction, in part because when I want to be not working, I want to turn off that working part of my mind. But that working part of my mind will not turn off in the presence of other people's writing. And whether that is reading books or watching television or films, but of that particular type, something that is fictional, that has plots and characters and it's made up, I cannot turn that stuff off. So I'm always constantly in editorial mode or writer mode, checking things off and saying, oh, I bet they're doing this, or oh, they should have done that, or oh, that was a nice little twist. And it's a complete busman's holiday, which those of you who are in the UK know the expression. Many other people in America don't recognize it, but it's pretty straightforward. It's like if you are a bus driver and you go on holiday and you're on a bus, the premise is you're not really having much of a holiday. So that's kind of what fiction is for me. So as a result, I'm actually getting to something here. As a result, I watch a lot of YouTube these days. And because Mr. Chris Fab, who is probably one of the folks tuning in tonight, because the kind Mr. Chris Fab puts these readings on YouTube, I started getting them on my feed. Well, and then of course, because I get these readings on my feed, I don't ever watch them. I mean, it's like reading my own books. It's like the last thing I want to do when I'm having downtime is like watch my own readings. And, I mean, no, not in a million years. It's bad enough I have to look at myself because, of course, it's always my face that's on the YouTube video thing as it comes up on the feed. But because of that, I also get other things, and I get reviews sometimes of my work and stuff like that. And I'm so ambivalent about it. Most of the reviews are very nice and thoughtful, and the analysis is good and all that stuff. But it's like I don't want to see them, and I don't know. I can't tell if it's because I'm afraid that somebody's going to go, well, this guy is really garbage. I don't know why anybody ever reads it, because as I've told you in the past, like one bad review, even if it's by somebody who's clearly mentally defective, will bum me out for days, and has like way more effect than 20 positive ones. And I guess it's kind of like why we have news. We don't have news about the normal things that are happening. Well, in the same, we have news about like horrible things that are happening quite frequently. I guess in the same sense, it's like, a good review is just, I feel like, okay, so I'm doing my job and these people are saying I've done my job. Whereas a bad review, for some reason, it's like that I take personally. Again, as I said, even if it's somebody who clearly should not be allowed to operate vehicles or, mess with electricity or prepare food for other people, no matter how stupid. I mean, I've seen like one sentence reviews on, on Amazon or something that were like, this guy can't even write, which is, how could anybody be bothered by that? But, we writers do. And I'm one of the less sensitive writers. Good God. I mean, I know writers who are just petrified by bad reviews, the field entirely. I'm much more confident than that. But even so, I'm very ambivalent. So I keep seeing these things, and it's like the Dragonbone Chair or, Otherland or whatever. And I'm like, I'd be interested. I mean, that's why I write. I want to interact with my readers and the people out there who are interested in the same things I am. But it also terrifies me. I don't know if that's just that I'm getting weirder as I'm getting older, but I definitely, it's like, I don't want to know, because if you're being nice and if you like the books, then it just will seem normal, and I'll just kind of like, it's like, it'll just slide right off me like water off a duck. But if you say like, but this part he could have done better, I'll be like, oh my God. Oh my God. And again, I'm not even one of the more sensitive writers, so it's kind of strange. Anyway, I don't know why I got off into all that, but Suzanne says, Joe Abercrombie is hilarious on Twitter, posting his worst reviews. Most of them are crazy. Oh, I mean, I know, exactly. I mean, the things that people find to comment on, or that the internet is the great democratization of every single damn stupid idea that anybody ever had. They can now put it online, and depending on the forum that they choose, they lots of people will see it. And the very fact of it being published in public in a way that, average people didn't used to be able to do. You had to go stand on a soapbox in the town square or something to have people hear you. It's a good thing in one sense, this democratization of the public voice. On the other hand, it means, that one of the problems with the internet is that, like, every opinion by some people is kind of given equal weight. I mean, some people who read things take in these things and give equal weight to any opinion they hear that sort of jibes with what they already believe. So we've got this incredible democratization, and there is no expertise anymore, which it's good and bad. I'm not saying it's an all bad thing, but when you're a writer and you realize that there are people who are writing on Amazon that like thousands of people are going to see, and they hate you, even if they're idiots. There's this idea of like, oh my God, just like when you look online for a restaurant recommendation, and you're on Yelp or something, and somebody has said, this is the worst service I've ever had. And it always makes you go like, oh, maybe I shouldn't order from these people, or maybe I shouldn't go to this restaurant. Even if it's like the only one, there's always this like wonder. Of like, oh my God, is it really secretly awful? And, so I always fear that people having that same reaction. They see some guy on Amazon saying, I don't know how this guy even gets books published. And they're going like, oh, maybe I won't read him after all because Joe Microcephalic on Amazon said he's an idiot. He's a bad writer. Anyway, I don't even know how I got into all of this. I was just thinking about all these things. Yes, Becky, I see what you sent me. Anyway, so let me say hello or check in with the people who have said hello already, and then I will see if there's anything else that I needed to tell you or that I have forgotten to tell you about. Honestly, not much happening at the moment. Our oldest child, our oldest biological child just had his birthday yesterday, and he is well and healthy, so that's a good thing. We've had continuing clear weather, so Big Dog Johnny is not the nervous wreck that he was. Walter, small dog, aka Tic Tac, which is my current name for him because he's the size of a Tic Tac, and also because he's peripatetic. He is continuously in motion. I mean, he must be 12 or 13 now, which is, even for a Chihuahua, is a pretty decent age. But he is just continuously in motion. He will never spend more than a couple of minutes in any one place, and he's like tick 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 tick. Those little nails on the floor, all over the house all day long. You're watching him, and it's astounding. He eats like a budgie, and yet he's got this incredible amount of energy, and he's just. When we go out at night in the backyard to take the dogs out to pee or something, the big dog just goes down and goes out and pees. The little dog is like back and forth along the deck and down the stairs and around downstairs and running around along the patio and backing up. And then he barks at the big dog and he runs back up and he's up at the top and then he's barking at me and he's down and he's back and he's just absolutely maddening. God, I wish I had that energy. Then again, I wouldn't want to weigh only 4.5 pounds or whatever he weighs. Maybe that's somehow part of it. He doesn't have a lot of body mass to carry around. Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked. I was going to say hello to the people who've checked in. And so Andre, hello, good to see you. Anna Maria, nice to have you with us. Suzanne, hello, hello, hello. There's my sainted mother-in-law, Hazel. Hello, sweetie, good to see you. A pleasure as always. Your daughter's upstairs sleeping the sleep of the just right now. So good to see you. Love to everybody there. Petra, hello, Petra. Good to see you. Winter, you too. A pleasure as always. Been thinking about New Zealand, obviously, because of Jacinda Ardern and all the stuff that's been in the news. Wouter, hello. Good to see you too, sir. Ilva, my dear Ilva. Hello, hello, hello. I'm working. I don't have the comments in front of me. I'm working just from the list of people who have commented because, again, Facebook, using the Facebook interface on this particular thing is not unlike putting barbecue skewers in your eyes or something. It's just so painful and it just doesn't work well. Anyway, so hello, Ilva. And hello, sweetie. Good to see you. Tracy, hello. Good to see you too. Isaac, hello. Chris, welcome. Good to have you. I was just citing you a few minutes ago. Cliff, hello. Good to see you, Cliff. Hope you and yours are all well. Dirk, hello, Dirk. Becky, I already said hello to when Becky accidentally direct messaged me instead of putting a comment on. But it's just as well because I actually saw your direct message, your DM, but I haven't seen your comment because I'm only seeing like the last 4 comments. Kristen, hello, good to see you too. Welcome aboard. Holger, a pleasure as always. Jeremy, hello, hello. My friend Jeremy. Iris is here, and 6 more, it says. That does me no good, folks. That does me no good. Who could any of them be? Well, they're not on this, not on the page where I'm looking. So, what can you do? I am in this death struggle with technology at the moment, which is funny. You know, I've always been fairly not. I'm not an engineer or a tech guru or anything like that by any means. However, I was like an early adopter. I had my first Macintosh back in the mid '80s. I've been using this equipment for years. I actually worked at Apple for several years. And worked with a lot of engineers who were working with the early versions of all these things, and yet I am still totally bumfuzzled by what happens sometimes, and trying to, especially with the streaming stuff. I usually can figure anything out given enough time, but it's not what you want. It's not the best process for when you're doing live broadcasting. You do not want to be trying to figure things out. Needless to say, and you guys know better than anybody, that's often what has happened, where I've been like going, okay, well, maybe if I do this, my picture will come back, or maybe if I fix this, or maybe if I unplug this mic and plug it into this jack instead, then it'll work better. So anyway, but we seem to be working tonight. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to assume that we're going to do everything. I'm going to be very careful not to do what I did last time, which was accidentally hit the end stream button and therefore cut myself off and not be able to get back on. So I'm going to be very careful about that and try not to handle anything I shouldn't handle. So, having said hello to those I can say hello to, because I couldn't say hello to the and 6 more, and apologies for that, I am going to continue with the burdensome chair. No, the bogan drain chain. No, whatever it's called. The Dragonbone Chair, which we have been reading, and we are now getting. Look, we only have a slender little bit of book left. Although I still, every time I pick this thing up, I cannot help asking myself, what kind of idiot writes things this long? It's just a bad decision all the way around. Anyway, so we are. What is happening here is that we are at Naglemund. Simon, Binnabic, and several others have left Naglemund in search of the Sword Thorn because of the ancient prophecy, and they are to the north, heading north, where they've hooked up with the Scythe, not in the current and contemporary sense of the word, but in the companionship, making common cause sense, the older sense of the phrase, to hook up. And but meanwhile, back at Naglemund, the king's army is coming. Prince Josua is waiting for reinforcements in the shape of Duke Leobardus of Naban, and there's skullduggery afoot within Leobardus's own army. And at the moment, the Leobardus and his Nabanite army has noticed that Guthwolf, the king's right-hand man, is currently with a small group of men, of soldiers, approaching Naglemund, and so he's rushed over with his army to try and cut them off from behind from the rest of the king's army and catch them up against the walls of Naglemund, etc., etc. So that's what's going on in a general sense. You'll just have to trust me that it kind of makes sense. Anyway, so continuing with the Dragonbone Chair. Merciful God, what is the Duke up to? Josua swore, rising in his stirrups to gain better vantage. He has turned east and is galloping full tilt toward the southern hills. Has he lost his wits? My lord, look, Daernoth shouted across to him. Look there, on the skirts of Bullback Hill. By the love of the Aedon, it's the king's army. What is Leobardus doing? Does he think to attack Elias unsupported? Josua slapped his horse's neck and spurred forward. It looks a small force only, Prince Josua, called Daernoth. An advance party, perhaps. Why didn't he send riders? The prince asked plaintively. Look, they will try and push them toward Naglemund, to trap them against the wall.
Why in God's name did Leobardus not send riders to me?
For those who don't remember, it's because Benegaris, Leobardus' son, eldest son, told him that he would send riders that have never arrived.
Why in God's name did Leobardus not send riders to me?
He sighed and turned to Izorn, who had pushed his father's bear helm back from his brow to better scan the horizon.
Now, we will have our mettle tested after all, friend.
The inevitability of fighting now seemed to draw serenity over Josua like a mantle. His eyes were calm, and he wore an odd half-smile. Izorn grinned over at Daernoth, who was loosening his shield from his saddle pommel, then looked back to the prince.
Let them test it. Let them test it, lord, said the duke's son.
Ride on, the prince shouted. The despoiler of Utenyade is before us. Ride! So crying, he spurred his piebald charger into a gallop, making the sod spurt beneath the horse's hooves. For Naglamund! Daernoth shouted, lifting his sword high. For Naglamund and our prince!
Gutwulf is standing fast, Jarnauga said. He holds on the hillside.
Now, by the way, I should probably, because we're going to be jumping scene a lot, I should tell you when the scene changes. The scene has just changed.
Gutwulf is standing fast,
Jarnauga said.
He holds on the hillside, even as the Nabanai come against him. Josua has turned to meet them. They're fighting, Vorsheva asked, frightened. What is happening to the prince? He has not reached the battle. There!
Jarnauga was striding down the wall toward the southwestern turret.
Gutwulf's knights take the first charge of the Nabanai. It is all confusion.
He squinted and knuckled his eyes.
What? What?
Towser put a finger in his mouth, staring and gnawing.
Do not go silent on me, Rimmersman. It is hard to make out what happens from this far,
said Jarnauga, unnecessarily, for neither of his two companions, nor anyone else on the castle walls, could see anything but a faint smear of movement in the shadow of misty Bullback Hill.
The prince bears down on the fighting, and Leobardus' and Gutwulf's knights are scattered along the hill slopes. Now,
he trailed off, concentrating.
Ah!
said Towser in disgust, slapping his skinny thigh.
By Saint Mirfath and the Archangel, this is worse than anything I can think of. I might as well read this in a book. Damn you, man, speak!
I changed section. Daernoth found it all unfolding before him as in a dream. The murky shimmer of armor, the shouting, and the muffled crash of blade on shield. As the prince's troop bore down on the combatants, he saw the faces of the Nabanai knights come slowly up, and the Erkenlanders, too, an eddy of surprise rippling out through the battle at their approach. For a timeless instant he felt himself a fleck of shining foam, prisoned at the crest of a hanging wave. A moment later, with a shocking roar and clash of arms, the battle was all around them, as Josua's knights came full against the flank of Gutwulf's boar and spears. Abruptly there was someone before him, a blank helmeted face above the rolling eyes and red mouth of a war charger. Daernoth felt a blow to his shoulder that rocked him in his saddle. The knight's lance struck his shield and slid away. He saw the man's dark surcoat before him for an instant, and swung his sword with both hands, feeling a shivering impact as it caromed past the shield and struck the knight's chest, toppling him from his steed down into the mud and bloodied grass. For a moment he was clear. He looked around, trying to find Josua's banner, and felt a distant throb in his shoulder. The prince and Izorn, Isgrimnir's son, were fighting back to back in the midst of a swirling surge of Gutwulf's knights. Josua's swift hand darted out, and Nidel pierced the visor of one of the black-crested horsemen. The man's hands flew to his metal-clad face, covered in an instant with red. Then he was yanked down out of sight as his reinless horse reared.
Daernoth saw Leobardus, the Duke of Naban, sitting his horse at the farthest southeastern edge of the battle, beneath his billowing kingfisher flag. 2 knights held their balking horses close by, and Daernoth guessed the large one, in the chasework armor, to be the Duke's son, Benegaris. Damn the man! Duke Leobardus was old, but what was Benegaris doing on the fringe of things? This was war. A shape loomed before him, and Daernoth spurred left to dodge a down-rushing battle-axe. The rider blew past, unturning, but was followed by another. For a while all was swept from his head, but the dance of stroke on stroke, as he traded blows with the Utiniator. The clangor of the field seemed to subside to a dull rush, like the sound of falling water. At last he found an opening in the man's guard and crashed a sword stroke against his helm, crumpling it in at the visor hinge. The knight toppled sideways and off. His foot caught in the stirrup so that he hung like a butchered hog in a pantry. His maddened horse dragged him away. Earl Guthwolf, black-mantled and black-helmeted, was now only a stone's throw away, dealing blows left and right with his great broadsword, holding off 2 blue-coated Nabani horsemen as if they were boys. Daernoth leaned down in his saddle to spur toward him. What glory to trade blows with the monster of Utiniate, when a toppling horse beside him spun his own mount around. Pausing, still as muddled as if he dreamed, he found he had been driven down the hill toward the outer edge of the battle. The blue and gold banner of Leobardus was before him. The Duke, white hair streaming from beneath his helm, stood high in the stirrups, shouting exhortations at his men, then pulled his visor down over his bright eyes, preparing to spur forward into the fray. The dream turned to nightmare as Daernoth watched. The one whom he took for Benegaris, moving so slowly that Daernoth almost felt he could reach out a hand and stop him, pulled back his long blade and carefully, deliberately, pushed it into the back of the Duke's neck under the helm. In the milling crowd, with the battle crashing all around them, it seemed that no one but Daernoth saw this terrible act. Leobardus arched his back as the blade was withdrawn, scarlet-streaked, and brought trembling, gauntleted hands up to his throat, holding them there for a moment as if trying to speak through some all-swaying grief. A moment later, the Duke sagged forward in his saddle, leaning into his horse's white neck and smearing the mane with his unprisoned blood before rolling off his saddle to the ground. Benegaris looked down for a moment as if contemplating a bird tumbled from its nest, then tugged his horn to his lips. For a moment, with shouting chaos on every side, Daernoth thought he saw a gleam in the black slot of Benegaris's helmet, as if the Duke's son caught his eye across the heads of all the fighting men between them. The horn sounded, long and harsh, and many heads turned. "Tambana Leobardus ace!" Benegaris bellowed, his voice a dreadful thing, ragged and sorrowful. "The Duke is down! My father is killed! Fall back!" Excuse me. He sounded the horn again, and even as Daernoth stared in unbelieving horror, there came another horn call from the hillside above them. A line of armored horsemen sprang out of the shadowed concealment of the trees. Next section. "Lights of the North!" Yarnauga groaned, sending Towser into another paroxysm of frustration. "Tell us, how goes the battle?" I fear it is lost," the Rimmersman said, his voice a hollow echo. "Someone has fallen." "Oh!" Vorsheva gasped, tears standing in her eyes. "Joshua! It is not Joshua!" "I cannot tell. I think it may be Leobardus, but now another force of men comes down the hillside, out of the trees, red-coated on their banner. An eagle? Falshar." Towser, Towser groaned and pulling off his belled hat, flung it clattering onto the stone. Mother of God, it is Earl Fangbald. Oh, you Cyrus, aid and save our prince. The Horsen bastards. They ride down on Josua like a hammer, Yarnauga said. And the Nabanai are confused. I think they... Next section. Fall back! Benegaris shouted, and espite his previes at his side, plucked the banner from the stunned arms of Leobardus' squire, riding the young man down beneath his horse's hooves. They are too many, Aspitus cried. Retreat! The Duke is dead! Daernoth pulled his horse around and plunged back through the melee toward Josua. A trap! He shouted. Fengbald's knights were thundering down the hillside, lances agleam. It is a trap, Josua! He cut his way through two of Guthwolf's boars, who would have blocked his path, taking hard blows on his shield and helm, running the second man straight through the throat and almost losing his sword as it stuck in the spine. He saw a rill of blood run past his visor and did not know if it was some other's or his own. The prince was calling back his knights, Izorn's horn blaring above the screaming and clashing of arms. Benegaris has killed the Duke, Daernoth cried. Josua looked up, startled, as the blood-stained figure bore down on him. Benegaris has stabbed him in the back. We are trapped. For a brief instant the prince hesitated, lifting his hand as though to raise his visor and look around. Fengbald and his eagles had pitched toward the Naglamunders' flank, trying to cut them off from their retreat. A moment later the prince raised his rain-wrapped shield arm. Your horn, Izorn, he shouted. We must cut our way out. Back to Naglamund. We are betrayed. Excuse me. With a blast of the horn and a great cry of anger, the prince's knights surged forward, directly into Fengbald's wide-strung crimson line. Daernoth goaded his horse forward, trying to reach the front, and watched as Josua's whirling blade snaked through the guard of the first eagle, striking, serpent-like, beneath the man's arm, in and out. A moment later, Daernoth found a host of red surcoats before him. He swung his blade and cursed. Although he did not know it, beneath his helm his cheeks were wet with tears. Fengbald's men, startled by the ferocity of their attackers, wheeled slowly about, and in that instant the Naglamunders broke through. Behind them, the Nabanai legions were in full retreat, flying brokenly back toward the Inniscrick. Guthwolf did not pursue them, but rather sent his troops to join Fengbald in pursuit of Josua's fleeing knights. Daernoth hugged his charger's neck. He could hear its breath rasping as they galloped full out, back across the meadows and fallow farmland. The sound of pursuit gradually fell away as the walls of Naglamund rose ahead. The gate was raised, a black, open mouth. Staring at it, his head throbbing like a beaten drum, Daernoth suddenly wanted very much to be swallowed, to go sliding down into deep, lightless oblivion and never come out again.